Welcome to another edition of Portfolio Briefing, a series that looks at how institutional investors are managing the impact of the Covid-19 crisis. My name is Mark Dunn and I'm the editor of Portfolio Institutional magazine. I'm glad to say that with me today is Roger Mattingly, Trustee Director of Ross Trustees. Hi Roger, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Mark. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, it's month 3 of the lockdown now, Roger, so how's it been for you?
It's been fantastic. Well, fantastic in terms of the weather up until, in fact, you and I were just chatting, until the last 48 hours, and it's gone very miserable out of my window as we speak. We're in the countryside, so we've been very fortunate in being able to get out and about a bit. And we've sort of, I think like most people, sort of got used to remote working and all the various Zooms and Fuses and WebExes and Microsoft Teams, etc. And it's almost second nature now. IT is not my forte, but I've sort of got used to it all. So yeah, thank you. We're as good as we can be under the circumstances.
Oh yeah, I think I've got used to not running for trains in the morning, so it's going to be a bit of a culture shock when we do have to go back to work.
Well, there is that. It will take some adjusting, I think, and we're all probably going to have to go back at the same time. Otherwise, it doesn't really work if we go back piecemeal.
It's interesting because throughout your career, have you ever experienced such a period of economic uncertainty before as we're seeing at the moment?
The honest answer is I haven't. I've been in the industry for 40 years, would you believe, or just over 40 years. And as you can imagine, I've seen a lot during that time. And the 80s were just mad. The 90s started off pretty woefully with recession. And then, of course, you had the bursting of the dot-com bubble at the end of the 90s. And that was a strange time. Then you had Enron and WorldCom and the Gulf War. And I always remember Saddam Hussein's statue falling at the same time as the FTSE fell to, I think, 3,280 or something. And then, of course, the credit crunch and the global economic crisis. But all of that sort of, it doesn't pale into insignificance compared to now. But this is very different, and it's seriously uncharted territory. And where the economic trauma ends up, who knows, Mark? But it's fairly obvious to me that there will be a lot of economies that are being held up by the skin of their teeth by the huge financial support that's been put in place. And then you get to thinking, well, how's that going to be repaid? Especially when in the UK, of course, we had the much heralded end to austerity a few months ago, in inverted commas. But I guess with governments, if they've got control over their currency, and if they've got a banking system that can carry on transacting with the private sector, then maybe it never needs to be repaid, but who knows? So no, uncharted territory, and never seen anything like this before.
And how are the schemes that you're working with coping with, operationally that is, during these difficult times?
Well, they're taking it very seriously. They're not underestimating the challenge, and almost without delay, we introduced fortnightly catch-up COVID risk management calls, where we had either the investment advisors or fiduciary managers in quite a few cases involved. We had the administrators involved, and in many cases, both the company and the trustees. Those have all been minuted, and we have actually constructed COVID-specific risk registers in addition to the normal main risk registers. And we are just doing everything we can to try and manage the challenges and the risks. All of those calls have been in addition to the existing infrastructure of trustee meetings, investment committee meetings, etc. And as you know, the main priorities have been to carry on paying pensions in their full, to make sure retirement settlements are settled, and also to make sure, unfortunately, the increase in some cases level of death, make sure those are settled without delay as well. So, I mean, all those priorities are being met, and I'm actually being pleasantly surprised at how well organisations have adapted to the new environment. It has been almost suspiciously smooth in that respect, but long may it remain.
Okay. Is there a concern perhaps that maybe this pandemic will create a long-term damage to the pensions industry if people are making fewer contributions, or salary rises are capped, or there's slower career progression?
It's a brilliant question. I mean, there's little doubt that in terms of what we're overseeing in the pensions industry and what we're tasked with looking after, it's a huge responsibility. There's little doubt that it has been and will be materially impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. Fortunately, perversely, because of the fear of Brexit, a no deal, and because of the general election, quite a lot of de-risking and prudent, cautious tweaking of investment strategies was done towards the tail end of last year. In fact, on all my appointments, we had consciously revisited the risk and reward relationships in those strategies and actually made some adjustments without adversely impacting the long-term investment return expectations. And that has been hugely beneficial, albeit it wasn't any sort of great prediction of a viral pandemic, but it was actually done for different purposes. So the levels of hedging, interest rates, inflation have been hugely beneficial in terms of the resilience of those investment strategies. And also currency, we've in many cases we've had a 50% currency hedge in place, which seems to have been quite fortuitous, quite opportune as well. So, but in terms of the industry as a whole, there will always be a need for retirement income. In fact, you could argue, all things being equal, that need, if anything, has probably possibly been accentuated. So there will always be a need for a pensions industry. I can't see that changing as a result of all of this. But what I think will change is that the degree of capability and competence will only continue to increase. And I think where there have been definitely there's no doubt in my mind that fiduciary management has helped, and the spontaneity of fiduciary management, just the infrastructure of what that entails and the agility that offers has been beneficial on those appointments. But also I have to say that I think there is anecdotal evidence that those trustee boards that are made up of other people who have other day jobs and maybe haven't got the likes of delegated fund management in place, I think have been struggling over the last 12 weeks or so.
Okay, good. It's interesting. A lot of these schemes will have long-term investment strategies, but in a time like this with lots of volatility, is this a time maybe to snap up a few bargains, or are people looking at this with a bit of caution, thinking we don't know what's going on here, we'll just see what happens?
It's a brilliant question, and I think again, where there's agility, there are serious opportunities. I mean, the FTSE's gone fairly mad in the last 2 or 3 days, and the US is up 40% from its low. So yeah, I mean those, and again, I have to say I've got the majority of my appointments now have fiduciary managers in place. We don't just let them get on with it. We don't backseat drive either, but we are very on the case in terms of what they're actually doing. We understand where the underlying investments are, not just our underlying fund managers. And I actually attend research meetings with them as well, which is I think possibly beyond the call of duty. But so we really do drill down to what's happening under the surface, and there's little doubt that they are actively taking advantage of some of these opportunities. Of course, you always have this dilemma, or not dilemma, this challenge of when something falls from 100 to 50, it has to go up by 100% to get back to where it was. So whilst there are some sparkling percentage returns in both the US and now the UK in the last few days, they are just repairing some of the damage that's gone before. So it's quite easy to fall into the trap of thinking the illusion of some of these percentages, but They are going from a a relative low compared to where they were at the end of last year. So yes to your answer, there are opportunities out there. Obviously, credit spreads they weren't quite as wide as they were in sort of 2008, 2009, but they widened quite considerably. Those are now coming back, so there are opportunities there. And as I say, the equity markets, there's no doubt now whether those will be hit again. If there is a second spike, that could damage those. At the moment, there doesn't seem to be any adverse impact in terms of the disruption and the horrible circumstances of the last few days in the US and now protests in the UK. So all things being equal, I think the equity markets do represent some opportunities, but I think it will be quite sector specific.
Yeah.
And it does appear that there's quite a polarization of impact in terms of COVID. And there are some sectors that are, I've got clients that are actually doing very well out of all of this, and I've got others that are struggling.
Some markets are coming back there, as you mentioned there, and you did mention the sort of fear of the second spike, the second wave. Of course, the longer this goes on, the longer the uncertainty, the more risk there is to your scheme's income streams. So what's the plan in place if some of that you don't meet your income targets?
It's again a brilliant question. One thing that really has heightened is the need for more granular cash flow projections.
Yeah.
And that is happening 6 to 12 months hence. It's always difficult to accurately monitor, in particular where personal interaction kicks in, like transfer values, etc. We have paused transfer values on a few appointments for various reasons, partly because of the volatility, but also because of the scammers who are in abundance and like vultures hovering at the moment. So we are very cautious of that. So we don't, and it's always difficult to predict the occurrence of transfer values, etc. That what is the certain parts of the cash flows are predictable. There's no doubt that all of this will have an impact on dividends, and it's not, and perversely, not only will the earnings potential for companies be, in many cases, be seriously hampered, and in some cases irrevocably hampered by COVID-19. The deficit payments into pension schemes will also hamper dividends, but of course, perversely, pension schemes benefit from dividends, as you quite rightly say. So liquidity is absolutely key at the moment, and making sure that we've got enough money not only to pay pensions, but if interest rates go up, to also make sure we've got enough money to meet collateral calls in terms of hedging. So it's cash flow and liquidity management, and the forecasting of that has become, as I say, much more detailed and much more granular. It was quite high level before, but that is becoming, as I say, much more, I was going to say accurate, but of course only time will tell whether it's accurate, but it's becoming more detailed.
Thanks for that, Roger. Finally, at a time like this, how important are pension schemes, advisors, the consultants, the asset managers? What kind of role are they playing at a time like this?
Well, as I say, they are on my appointments. I have 12 in total, of various shapes and sizes, not just DB. I also chair 3 DB master trustee boards. The investment advisors or the investment managers, whether it's fiduciary management, have been involved in, I think without exception, all of those fortnightly COVID risk management calls. Again, it sounds a strange thing to say, but I think this is only accelerating the need for real competence, because this isn't for the faint-hearted, and those investment consultants and those investment managers that are more cosmetic maybe than others will struggle in this environment. So there is a, dare I say it, there's an intellect that goes with all of this, that it's not just about experience, it's not just about reading books, it's about really having the understanding of what's going on. And it is riveting, both from a macro level and from a bottom-up level as well. it is riveting, and it's very difficult to work out what's going to happen next. But positioning, through good investment advice and good investment management is absolutely crucial, and having the agility, as you quite rightly pointed out earlier, Mark, having the agility to take advantage of the opportunities that will, as is often the case out of such adversity, they will arise, and sometimes they'll arise in a very short space of time, and in some cases they'll have a very short window. So it's again, spontaneity and ability are fairly crucial at this moment in time. And I do think it will find out those trustee boards and those investment advisors that are not totally up to scratch will unfortunately be exposed during this.
Roger, thank you very much for your time. It's good to hear your insights, and hope you stay safe. Thank you.
And you. Thank you very much.